Welcome to session 10 of the Symbol course. Today we start discussing personality, focusing on personality types, personality theories, and the development of personality. This quotation by Ralph Waldo Emerson gives us hope by reminding us that we decide our destinies by starting with small steps, such as a carefully sown thought. Sow a thought and reap an act. Sow an act and reap a habit. Sow a habit and reap a character. Sow a character and reap a destiny. Today we start with a video that at nearly 14 minutes is longer than our usual introductory videos. It does, however, provide a good overview of personality. It's entitled Personality Psychology. If you care to watch it, I've also included a second video entitled Stop Getting Triggered. Next are our usual reminders directed mostly at people doing the course in a group. Please take a few moments to read these on your own. To watch this week's mindfulness practice video, please go to the website now. For people doing the YouTube course as part of a group, you can now pause for questions, comments, or feedback. Let's start as usual by reviewing what we're going to do today. We will start by reviewing the Simple Manual Session 10, which introduces the concept of personality. At the midway point, we will pause for a break. There will also be time for questions, comments, discussion, and maybe for practicing and reviewing tools, strategies, and skills. At this point, please rate your homework. Where do you start a discussion of personality? Let's first give an overview of what we're going to cover today in our discussion of personality. Today we'll discuss 1. Personality, focusing on definitions, classifications, theories, and personality development. We will then talk about 2. The dual process theory of personality, and 3. The hot-cold empathy gap. In 2 weeks, we'll explore 2 important aspects of personality: temperament and character. The picture on the left of the slide is of the Odeon of Herodes Atticus, built at the base of the Acropolis in Athens, Greece. The ancient Greeks invented theater and built many large theaters such as this one into hillsides. What are the origins of the word personality? The word personality comes from prosopon, the masks worn by Greek actors, which were designed to amplify their voice so that they would be heard by the audiences in the vast ancient Greek outdoor amphitheaters that could sit up to 20,000 people. We use many adjectives to describe personality traits. On the left of the slide is a list of some of them. We also use some common terms when discussing personality. Let's look at some of these terms and their definitions. The definition of personality is the characteristic set of behaviors, thoughts, and emotional patterns that are present in an individual and evolve from biological and environmental factors. Repeatedly falling into holes is a feature of personality. Avoiding holes, therefore, implies changing aspects of one's personality. Personality traits are the specific characteristic patterns of thinking, feeling, and behaving present in an individual, such as ocean, which we will look at later. Personality types are psychological classifications of different types of individuals. Some classifications describe normal, others abnormal or disordered personality. The DSM definition of a personality disorder is a term used in psychology to describe types of mental disorders in which individuals may have rigid, unhealthy, or maladaptive patterns of thinking, feeling, and behaving that differ significantly from what is expected and that cause distress or problems functioning. Personality theories are models or maps that strive to describe and explain, using psychological theories, the complex territory of the patterns of human feelings, thoughts, and behaviors. Theories of personality development, they're explanations and descriptions of how personality develops over the lifespan. Personality facade is the public personality that helps to hide a person's complex underlying feelings, thoughts, and behavioral urges. I looked up the word classification dictionary. It says that it's the systematic arrangement in groups or categories according to established criteria. Does that mean that personality classifications take all the different personalities that exist and try to group them into categories? Exactly. Personality classifications are the ways medicine, psychiatry, and psychology have tried to organize the whole gamut of human personalities into discrete types. There are many different personality classifications. Today, we'll survey just a few biological and psychological classifications. Some classifications group personality by categories into which a person either does or does not belong. For example, being pregnant, not pregnant. Other classifications describe personality dimensionally, which means that they consider personality to be a combination of some of different factors. For example, ocean. Let's start our discussion of personality by going back to the first great psychologists, the ancient Hindus, and its offshoot, Buddhism. Western psychology over the last 40 years has been greatly influenced by these insights of these ancient cultures. Hinduism is the most psychological of the great religions. It is also a complex social system. Its deep insights are timeless and have greatly influenced Western psychology. Hinduism places great emphasis on understanding the individual human mind and how it fits into the world. Hinduism's personality theory is based on the four duties, stages, and stations of life. Humans have four duties or want four things. One, pleasure. Two, worldly success. Three, happiness. And four, liberation or the path to God pursued through the four yogas, knowledge, love, work, or psychophysical exercises. Human psychosocial development can be divided into four life stages. One, the student. Two, the householder. Three, the forest dweller. Four, the renunciate. Humans also fall into four social classes or stations. One, the seers, who are the priests and teachers. Two, the leaders, the nobles and warriors. Three, the doers, the merchants, entrepreneurs, and business people. And four, the followers, who are the workers. In Hinduism's four life stages, worldly success, which is considered fleeting and short term, is the main priority of the first half of life, which includes the student and householder stages. The main priority of the second half of life, the forest dweller and renunciate stages, is finding liberation or a path to God. In the spiritual version of Hinduism, the stations of life, which include the seers, the leaders, the doers, and the followers, are not considered to be hereditary. A follower parent can have a seer child, for example. In an unfortunate corruption of this original doctrine, sects of Hinduism ignored this teaching, giving rise to the hereditary Hindu caste system. As we've previously mentioned, the ancient Greeks developed one of the earliest biological theories of personality. Galen, who lived from 129 to 216 CE, adopted Hippocrates' system of medicine, which held that the body was composed of humors, or chemical types, and applied it to personality, proposing one of the earliest personality classifications. Galen proposed four personality types: choleric, sanguine, phlegmatic, and melancholic. Choleric personalities were thought to have an excess of yellow bile. They were thought to be determined, quick to act, fiery, energetic, and passionate. Sanguine personalities were dominated by blood. They were thought to be warm-hearted, outgoing, volatile, optimistic, and cheerful. Phlegmatic personalities had a preponderance of phlegm. They were thought to be slow, patient, calm, quiet, shy, rational, and consistent. Melancholic personalities were dominated by black bile. They were thought to be serious, anxious, quiet, fearful, depressed, poetic, artistic, and sad. Hindu personality theory and classification greatly influenced Carl Jung's personality types, which were then adapted into the Myers Briggs personality inventory. Another personality classification, the Enneagram, which is often used in spiritual direction, was brought to the West by G.I. Gurdjieff, an Armenian philosopher and one of the most intriguing figures of the 19th and early 20th centuries. While some theories attempt to explain personality types psychologically, others offer biological explanations. Ellen Fisher, for example, attempts to explain personality based on four hormones and their relative proportions in an individual. Fisher, like Galen, describes four personality types. The directors have a preponderance of testosterone. They are analytical, tough-minded, exacting, skeptical, and determined to win. The negotiators have a preponderance of estrogen. They see the big picture, have people skills, verbal skills. They are imaginative, intuitive, and compassionate. The builders have a preponderance of serotonin. They are cautious, conventional, meticulous, respectful of rules and authority, and religious. The explorers have a preponderance of dopamine. They are curious, creative, spontaneous, energetic, mentally flexible, and daring. Fisher also makes a link between these four neurotransmitters and political leanings of individuals in whom they dominate, with liberals tending to be high on estrogen, libertarians high on dopamine, conservatives high on testosterone, and authoritarians high on serotonin. In contrast to Galen, Ellen Fisher has published scientific sound work that supports her theories. Another popular personality classification is known as the Big Five or Ocean, which describes 5 personality traits. Individuals can be classified on a range from low to high for each of these traits. Those combinations constitute personality. The 5 traits are openness or imagination, conscientiousness, as in self-discipline and thoughtfulness, extroversion, as in sociability, agreeableness, as in being cooperative and good-natured, and neuroticism, as in a tendency towards unstable emotions. While some classifications describe variants of normal personality, others, such as the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, or DSM, describe variants of abnormal or disordered personality. The DSM, or Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, contains what is today the most widely used classification of personality abnormalities. The DSM proposes 10 different personality disorders grouped into 3 clusters. Cluster A, the odd and eccentric, B, dramatic and emotional, and C, fearful and anxious. DSM is a classification, not a theory. Let me make some comments on the DSM classification of personality. The DSM classifies personality pathology, not normal personality. The DSM is divided into 5 axes. Axis 1 lists mental health and substance abuse disorders, while Axis 2 lists personality disorders. The DSM definition of personality disorder is the pattern of behavior and inner experience that differ significantly from what is expected and cause distress or problems functioning. Mainstream psychiatry has tended to treat Axis 1 diagnosis, such as schizophrenia and bipolar disorder, as legitimate psychiatric issues, but has sometimes stigmatized people diagnosed with Axis 2 personality disorders. Much of this is driven by a lack of understanding of personality, leading to judgment. DSM is known by some critics as the Book of Woe or of Insults. The various personality disorder diagnoses were arrived at by committees of experts, while many other experts were left out of these decisions and discussions. As we will see in this course, we are making headway in understanding the causes of the emotional dysregulation associated with personality disorders by understanding it as arising out of the interactions between temperament and character, especially when trauma and/or attachment issues are present. Mainstream psychiatry and DSM diagnosis are generally not adequately informed by emerging knowledge in the fields of attachment and trauma. Emotional dysregulation may be a better term to describe people's mental health issues than a diagnosis such as borderline personality, which is by far the most often diagnosed DSM personality disorder. Among other reasons, this is because emotional dysregulation is dimensional, not categorical. In other words, we are all, to different extents, emotionally dysregulated in some ways. Biological psychiatry relies heavily on one tool: pharmacotherapy or medications. Medications can be very helpful for some people. For others, especially those whose mental health issues are related to trauma and attachment issues, medication may be of limited help, and psychotherapy, the most effective treatment with or without medications. The pharmaceutical industry is a powerful force that has influenced psychiatry towards its biological orientation. Medications should be considered in the treatment of emotional dysregulation, but we should not rely on them alone. When we over-rely on medications, they may do more harm than good. The most helpful approach to emotional dysregulation is psychoeducation, learning coping and self-regulating skills, tools, and techniques. Learning and mastering these requires the active participation of the client. This is hard work and can be a challenge. These approaches are also often not easily accessible. You watched two videos, one on DSM origin story and the other on personality disorders. Please go to the website now. I can see how classifying personality helps us to begin to understand it better. What's the next step in developing that understanding? So far, we talked about personality classifications. If we want to understand personality, we also want to develop theories or models to explain what it is. There are four well-accepted personality theory models: the psychodynamic, personality trait, humanistic, and social cognitive. Let's briefly describe each. Psychodynamic personality theory originated with Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung. It views personality as the struggle between people's animal instincts and the pressures of socialization, the id and the superego mediated by the ego. It emphasizes childhood experiences and the unconscious mind. Personality trait theory was developed by Gordon Allport and Ernst Heisenk. It suggests that people exhibit consistent psychological traits, such as the one described in the ocean model: openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. The emphasis in this model is on identifying, describing, and measuring personality traits. Humanistic personality theories originated with Carl Rogers and Abraham Maslow. They see people as seeking personal growth and striving towards becoming their full selves. The emphasis in this model is on psychological growth, free will, and personal awareness. Social cognitive personality theory was initially developed by Albert Bandura. It sees personality as being shaped by observation, imitation, and modeling. The emphasis in this model is on observational learning, self-efficacy, and situational influences. Although each of these four perspectives has something important to contribute to the understanding of personality, we will, in the simple course, leave three of them aside and concentrate on psychodynamic personality theory. As we have already said, psychodynamic personality theory originated with Freud, who had theories about the one, structure of personality. This is the iceberg: conscious, unconscious, id, superego, and ego. And two, personality development. which he called the oral, anal, phallic, latency, and genital stages. After Freud, psychodynamic personality theory evolved in two main directions. The first was a field called ego psychology, which is rooted in the id, superego, and ego models. It focuses on the normal and pathological development of personality and how id, or instinctual impulses, are managed. Today, we'll briefly review ego psychology. The other offshoot of psychodynamic theory was objects of relations theory, which considers that the process of developing personality occurs in relations to other people. Attachment theory is the most researched and validated offshoot of object relations, and it is one of the theories we will return to in some detail later in this course. If psychodynamic theory evolved in two directions, ego psychology and object relations, are we going to explore both? Both ego psychology and object relations are interesting and helpful in understanding personality. Our time is, however, limited, so today we will briefly introduce ego psychology. For the remainder of the course, we will, however, follow the object relations branch of psychodynamics, which gave rise to attachment theory. For now, let's start with a brief overview of ego psychology. Ego psychology is a psychological theory of personality first developed by Sigmund and Anna Freud. Ego psychology focuses on the conflict between the superego, norms and morals, and the id, instincts and desires. This conflict between id and superego is mediated and resolved by the ego. The ego is responsible for reality testing and a sense of personal identity. Each individual's ego has typical ways of dealing with, defending against, and resolving the internal conflicts between id and superego. These typical ways are called ego defenses, or defenses for short. Each person uses some defenses more than others. The common ego defenses range from better to less well adapted, or from more mature to neurotic, immature, and pathological. The person's most commonly used ego defenses determine their personality. Ego psychology may be best understood by giving an example. Consider a scenario involving the mother of a young baby. Imagine that one day she gets up at 6 in the morning and goes about her normal daily routine, which includes caring for her 4-month-old baby. For most of the day, the baby is their usual normal self. However, starting around supper time, the baby becomes fussy. The mother and her partner, who just got home from work, take turns consoling the baby. They go through the usual parent mental checklist for a fussy baby. The baby is not hungry, his diapers are not wet, he does not have a fever, he's not dehydrated. As far as they can tell, nothing major is wrong, but the baby will just not settle and keeps crying. They consider going to the emergency room, but decide to hold off. They take turns staying up with the baby. Mary, the mother, takes the first shift from midnight to 2 a.m., while her partner gets some rest so he can go to work the next day. It's now 1:30 in the morning, and Mary's exhausted. Under normal circumstances, she might be more tolerant, but right now, she's tired and irritable. Her id is telling her to just leave the baby in this crib and get some rest, but her superego is telling her that doing that would be neglectful and irresponsible. Now, the conflict between id and superego is mediated by the ego, defines Mary's personality. What happens in this situation and the defenses Mary uses will likely also be how she handles other stressful situations. The scenario might unfold in several different ways. Let's consider the possibilities starting with the healthiest and progressing towards the unhealthiest. 1. Psychologically healthy Mary's ego acknowledges both her id's irritation and desire to leave the baby, as well as her superego's injunction that she cannot do that. Having perspective, Mary knows that she will not always feel this way. This will pass. Needing to replenish her energy, she awakes her partner, looking for support, and then together they soothe the baby by singing Rockabye Baby. As she and her partner sing this lullaby, Rockabye Baby in the treetop, when the wind blows, the cradle will rock, when the bow breaks, the cradle will fall, and down will come baby, cradle and all. They realize for the first time that the lyrics are about a baby falling from the top of a tree. The absurdity of singing this lullaby in their present circumstances strikes them, and they burst out laughing, which dissipates the tension. The baby, surprised, stops crying and starts laughing too. He soon settles down and falls asleep. Humor, along with altruism, suppression, sublimation, and anticipation, are considered healthy or mature ego defenses. 2. A slightly less psychologically healthy Mary, rather than acknowledging her its irritation, ignores or represses it, and concludes that I have only the most loving and caring feelings towards my child at all times. Mary is reacting against her irritation and coming to the opposite conclusion. This defense is called reaction formation. Mary's already meager energy resources become further depleted as she waits until 2 a.m. for her partner to relieve her. When he does, she expresses her irritation at him. This ego defense is called displacement. Both reaction formation and displacement are called neurotic ego defenses. 3. An even less psychologically healthy Mary might convince herself that what the baby needs is to be left alone in his crib. She goes into the living room and puts on headphones. She falls asleep. 1 hour later, her partner comes to the living room and tells her that the baby was crying inconsolably for the last hour. He says that he woke up and had been taking care of the baby since then. Seeing Mary asleep, he decided to let her be. Mary is angry and defends herself, saying she had not heard the baby and that he was being mean by accusing her of neglect. Mary uses passive aggression and projection as ego defenses. 4. A psychologically immature Mary might act out her irritation by, while changing the baby's diaper, squeezing his arms to the point of leaving marks. When her partner sees the marks and asks her what happened, she replies, "Oh, nothing. I was just holding him so I could change his diaper. He must have struggled too hard." Passive aggression, projection, and acting out are considered immature defenses. 5. A delusional Mary could do a number of things. She might attribute its aggressive impulses to hurt the baby to the baby and conclude that the baby is trying to hurt her. This could lead to Mary using force to stop the baby from attacking her and making her life so difficult. Alternatively, a delusional Mary could deny and dissociate from reality and believe and act as if this is an ordinary and lovely evening. Psychotic denial and delusional projection are considered primitive or psychotic ego defenses. Each of us tends to repeatedly use the same defenses, though when we're very stressed, we can regress into more immature ones. Ego defenses include denial, displacement, projection, rationalization, reaction formation, regression, repression, sublimation, compartmentalization, acting out, altruism, avoidance, conversion, dissociation, fantasy, humor, humility, idealization, identification, introjection, passive aggression, splitting, somatization, undoing, and wishful thinking. Each person tends to use the same ego defenses repeatedly, and ego psychology sees this as determining their personality. Harvard psychiatrist George Vaillant grouped ego defenses into 4 categories, which are associated with personality maturity. Level 1 are the pathological defenses, psychotic denial, delusional projection. Level 2, the immature defenses, fantasy, projection, passive aggression, and acting out. Level 3, the neurotic defenses, intellectualization, reaction formation, dissociation, displacement, and repression. Level 4 are the mature defenses: humor, sublimation, suppression, altruism, and anticipation. Coping mechanisms and ego defenses are overlapping concepts. Ego defenses emerge when a person is in a stressful state in which there is a conflict between id and superego. If a person has good self regulating skills, their ego is good at mediating conflicts between their id and superego, and they don't often stray too far from the window of tolerance. So far, we've talked about classifications and theories of personality. Are we going to talk about theories of personality development? Different personality development theories attribute relatively different importance to the contributions on personality of one, nature, or what is innate to the individual at birth, and two, nurture, or what is learned and due to the environment. Personality development theories also range on a spectrum from seeing children as blank slates, which are wholly influenced by life experience, to seeing them as one, coming into the world with mostly selfish traits that have to be restrained and civilized by society through proper upbringing. This was the view put forward by 16th century English philosopher Thomas Hobbes. Or two, coming into the world as fundamentally good, only to be corrupted by their upbringing. This was the view put forward by 18th century Swiss philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Today, most psychologists recognize the importance of both nature and nurture and see children as going through stages of personality development. At each stage, the child's temperament interacts with their environment in complex ways. In the course of psychosocial development, children face challenges that they must negotiate more or less successfully before proceeding to the next developmental stage. How well they progress through these psychosocial stages is critical to the development of their personality. Let's first look at Freud's theory of personality development. Freud postulated that there were 5 stages of personality development: the oral, anal, phallic, latent, and genital stages. To be psychologically healthy, individuals had to successfully complete each stage. Mental abnormalities arose if a stage of development was not completed successfully, in which case the person became fixated at that particular stage. Freud's developmental theory sees personality development as being affected by childhood experiences. Babies might fail to negotiate the oral stage if they were forcefully fed, deprived, or weaned early. This might result in psychological problems such as dependency and aggression. Freud's theory of personality development isn't very popular today. This contrasts with his structural theory, which has stood the test of time. One theory of personality development that has stood the test of time is Erik Erikson's. Erik Erikson was a German-American developmental psychologist and psychoanalyst. Erikson coined the phrase identity crisis. He also described 8 critical stages of personality development, each of these 8 stages being a building block that is crucial to healthy maturation. A stage that is not successfully negotiated affects all later development. If a toddler, for example, was unable to trust his parental figures, he won't be able to move on to the stage of autonomy, which is commonly misnamed as the terrible twos. That toddler, instead of achieving autonomy, will feel shame and doubt, feelings which will continue to impact his development as he tries, but now with a significant psychological handicap, to move through the subsequent stages of development. Erikson's 8 stages are 1. Trust versus mistrust. If their needs are dependably met, infants develop a sense of basic trust or secure attachment. 2. Autonomy versus shame and doubt. Toddlers learn to exercise will and do things for themselves, or they doubt their abilities. 3. Initiative versus guilt. Preschoolers learn to initiate tasks and carry out plans, or they feel guilty about efforts to be independent. 4. Industry versus inferiority. Children learn the pleasure of applying themselves to tasks, or they feel inferior. 5. Identity versus confusion. Teenagers work at refining a sense of self by testing roles and then integrating them to form a single identity, or they become confused about who they are. 6. Intimacy versus isolation. Young adults struggle to form close relationships and to gain the capacity for intimate love, or they feel socially isolated. 7. Generativity versus stagnation. The middle-aged discover a sense of contributing to the world, usually through family and work, or they may feel a lack of purpose. 8. Integrity versus despair. When reflecting on their life, the older adult may feel a sense of satisfaction or a sense of failure. Does the psychodynamic theory of personality fit in with the concepts of the emotional and rational mind? Absolutely. The emotional mind overlaps significantly with the Freudian id. The rational mind, on the other hand, incorporates aspects of the ego and superego. The rational and emotional mind come up over and over again in the writings of psychologists. Often different terms are used to refer to these concepts, but they are very similar to the rational and emotional mind. William James, an American philosopher, psychologist, and physician, brother of novelist Henry James, for instance, described two parallel processes taking place in the human mind and called these, one, associative reasoning, which is very similar to emotional mind, and two, true reasoning, similar to rational mind. James's theory is called the dual process theory of personality. Daniel Kahneman, an Israeli economist and Nobel Prize winner, popularized James's concept in his 2011 book, Thinking Fast and Slow. Kahneman, drawing on neuroscience, described James' two parallel processes, calling them Systems 1, which is emotional, and System 2, which is rational mind. Kahneman agrees with Freud on the power of the unconscious, writing, quote, System 1 runs the show. That's the one you want to move, close quote. The relation between these two systems has been described in a concept called the empathy gap. Dual process theory of personality describes two parallel information processing systems. It was first proposed by physician psychologist William James. It says that we have an A, emotional mind, also known as System 1, which is associated with the limbic system and brainstem, and B, a rational mind, System 2, associated with the cerebral cortex. System 1, the emotional mind, is similar to the id. System 2, the rational mind, is similar to the superego and ego. Dual process theory holds that we simultaneously process information in two parallel but very different ways, emotionally and rationally. We have two minds figuring things out at the same time, coming to different conclusions, and making different decisions as to what to do. One useful metaphor for how these two systems interact is that of the accelerator and brake pedals of a car. Emotions in the id are the accelerator versus reason, superego, and ego, the brakes. The balance between the brakes and accelerator varies from person to person and in the same person over time, and is part of personality. There are a number of factors affecting the balance between the accelerator and brake in each person at each point in time. These include their temperament, character, circumstances, level of stress, energy balance, illness, substance use, etc. There are some noteworthy differences between Systems 1 and 2. Systems 1, the emotional mind, runs on autopilot. It's fast, effortless, difficult to control or modify, has no self-awareness, is evolutionarily old, shared with animals, nonverbal, and independent of general intelligence. System 2, in contrast, is slow, effortful, logical, skeptical, deliberately controlled, has self-awareness, is evolutionarily recent, uniquely human, linked to language, logical, sequential, heritable, and linked to general intelligence. How do System 1 and 2, rational and emotional mind, communicate and coordinate in a person? The hot-cold or rational emotional mind empathy gap describes how the rational and emotional minds, or System 1 and 2, interact. Why do we sometimes seem to be more than one person? Sometimes System 1 is in charge, sometimes it's System 2. When we are emotionally triggered, we switch from system 2, rational mind, to system 1, emotional mind, just like a light switch. The rational, system 2, and emotional, system 1, minds aren't very aware of or understand each other and don't communicate well because they don't speak the same language. One speaks verbalese, the other emotionalese. The language they do share is imagery. In other words, there is an empathy gap between our hot emotional minds and our cold rational minds. In an emotional or appetite driven state of mind, we act like people with certain values and priorities. When in rational mind, calm and thinking clearly, we can't relate to the person we became in the heat of the moment. We say, that wasn't me. System 1 is not very good at knowing or predicting what System 2 will think, feel, or do, and vice versa. It's like having two people inside of you, an emotional and a rational one. The one part of the mind that knows and can be aware of both System 1 and System 2 is wise mind, or the self-observing mind, associated with the lateral prefrontal cortex. Wise mind is similar to the Freudian ego. It is because wise mind can see both rational and emotional minds that if we want to change the balance between our emotional and rational systems, we need to develop wise mind. Although we all have the wise mind wiring, it develops to different degrees in each of us. We can, however, foster its development. The emotional brain is the one that goes on a shopping spree. The rational brain is the one that is appalled by the amount of money we ended up spending. The dieting, rational brain plans to go to the supermarket and buy healthy food. The hungry, emotional brain buys appealing processed foods. The rational brain decides that it's a bad idea to drink so much as to have a hangover. The next Saturday night, the emotional brain gets drunk again. To watch a video on the empathy gap, please go to the website now. The importance to our lives of the balance between the emotional and rational minds is illustrated by the famous marshmallow experiment. The famous Stanford marshmallow experiment was first conducted by Walter Mischel in 1972. Children in the study were led into a room and a marshmallow was placed in front of them. They were told they could eat the marshmallow, but if they waited 15 minutes in the room alone, when the experimenter returned, they would be given a second marshmallow as a reward. The researchers then followed these children as they developed and through their adult lives and found that those who were able to wait the 15 minutes without eating the marshmallow were more competent adolescents and did better in school. Imaging studies revealed that the prefrontal cortex, a part of the brain, was more active in those who were able to wait, whereas the ventral striatum, a part of the emotional brain, was more active in those who could not. To watch a video on the marshmallow experiment, please go to the website now. There is a debate as to whether, over the course of history, things have gotten better or worse. Part of that debate concerns the balance between rational and emotional mind. Has that balance changed over the course of history? Are we more rational today than were our ancestors? I side with Martin Luther King Jr., who famously said, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice." Over the course of history, humans have been developing better breaks and increasingly thinking with their rational mind, rather than simply following their emotional brain. According to integral theory, at each subsequent stage of growth, from warrior to integral, humans tend to use progressively more mature ego defenses. The higher up in the brain is our center of gravity, emotionally centered versus reason centered versus mindfully centered, the better we tend to manage our emotions and impulses. But we can easily regress to being dominated by emotions when we are stressed and when we come under the influence of charismatic figures or social media algorithms. We need to be more mindful of and manage our instincts and emotions to thrive as individuals and to survive as a species. In the PowerPoint presentation that you'll find on the website, there is a review and practice component that covers the tools, techniques, and strategies that we have previously covered in the simple course. Looking over those slides will help you to consolidate the material. Let's look at the homework for this session. Thank you for spending this time with me today, and see you at the next session.